Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name's Mahalia. Today we'll be making brioche sourdough bread, which is beautiful, as you can see. In my pan here, I'm just going to be adding some honey, and then I'll follow it up with some whole milk, and then place it onto the back of my stove in order to warm it up. I put on the melt function, which is like commonly used for chocolate or whatever, maybe something you want to warm slowly and not burn. And I do just want to warm the milk to melt the honey, quite honestly, without burning it or getting it to like boiling temperature, because I do still have to combine it with the sourdough. And the same like with yeast, regular yeast, you don't want to combine a super hot liquid with it because then it won't leaven your bread. It won't work effectively. So that's just adding the milk to the pan here. Oh, I did want to say the reason why I'm making sourdough brioche. I've made sourdough bread before. My preferred bread is brioche, though. It's not my partner's favorite, but it's my favorite. Brioche bread is known for being super rich and soft and delicious. The reason why it's so rich, as you can see, is because of the butter and the eggs and all of that good stuff. You do add quite a few eggs into this and the butter, which is much different like than other breads. It's almost like you're making a cake, but not quite. It's still a bread, but it has like that softness and richness. It's really good when you make it, when you use it for French toast. It's commonly used for French toast or like burger buns. They're super like somewhat denser than your typical burger bun. But yeah, I love them. I used to use them all the time to make French toast sticks. So I just thought, what better than to combine sourdough and brioche and turn it into a sandwich loaf. That's what we'll be using it for this time. I do slice it up and we use it for sandwiches. I make it as French toast. I gift the loaf to my mom. It's just awesome. So in my bowl over there, I just added in my butter, and then I'm going to crack in my eggs after putting away my scale. Right here, I have 4 eggs. They are room temperature, so I just had them sitting in the bowl on this particular day. And I think this is the revised version because I did make this recipe before, and there are 3 egg, sorry, 3 whole eggs in 1 egg yolk. You can reserve the white, of course, to mix with your eggs or something like the next day. Definitely doesn't have to go to waste. But I'm going to put the other whole eggs in here. I don't crack mine separately into a bowl because I do not have chickens. So I know like it should be good practice to crack them separately in a bowl, because even with store-bought eggs, you could possibly get a bad one, and that's an awful experience. I've heard it from my family members and things like that where they've cracked a bad egg into something that was store-bought, but as of yet, I haven't had any issues, but I should probably start up that habit pretty soon. So here I have my nice bubbly sourdough starter, which, funny enough, was dormant, very, very dormant. Previously, I'd had it in the back of my fridge for about a year. Um, Things got really hectic. We just had a lot going on. So I didn't have the time to deal with sourdough bread because commonly you have to feed it 24 hours, or like I guess you could say 8 to 12 hours before you plan to use it. So one morning you can get up nice and early or whatever time you usually get up and then feed your sourdough starter. Then usually by I guess you could say dinner time or midday, depending on how warm your house is. Like a couple different factors, how much you feed it. You can make your bread, and then usually you'll set it to the side to let it rise. You can put it in the fridge so it does like a cold ferment so that it takes a little bit longer. Or I usually set my breads in like my microwave, or you can put them in your oven with the light on so that it's warm in there, not too hot. As of right now, usually things I tend to put it in my sunroom But during the summer, it was way too hot. So I just had them in my microwave. Now back here, I'm just stirring up the honey and milk because it is pretty warm. I'm just making sure the honey is fully dissolved before I remove the pan from the stove and then combine everything in my mixing bowl. So here I am grabbing a small bowl to measure out my flour and my scale. If you're not familiar with sourdough, commonly the measurements are weighted because it is the most accurate measurement even for like my regular baking and things like that. Now I do commonly use uh, my scale instead of measuring cups. And it's, I think, a lot easier. You don't have to store as many measuring utensils when you use a scale versus having like the teaspoons and tablespoons and the cup measurements and the liquid measurement cups because you technically should use separate ones. It's just a lot easier. So here I am measuring out the all purpose flour for this recipe. I know some people use home ground flour. I have not ventured into that territory just yet. And even right now, we're not using all purpose flour at all. This was a little while ago when we were still using it, but his sensitivity has gotten worse, so we've just omitted it altogether and have switched to doing strictly gluten-free recipes. But you can use, I think it's common like soft white wheat or a combination of soft white wheat and hard white wheat, which is used for breads, or use like an actual bread flour, which is typically higher in protein, so the structure is a bit better. Here in my bowl, I'm just mixing together the softened butter. I forgot to mention that it's softened, not melted, and the eggs. I am whisking it together and I also end up kneading the bread by hand. I'm not afraid of a little hard work for some rewards. Um, it does take a long time though. I will say that. I am not going to try to fool you and say, oh, it's easy. It's no problem. You can definitely do it by hand. No, it's not easy at all. And I might even suggest just put it in your stand mixer. I do mix it most of the way by hand, and then I put it in my mixer for maybe like 2 minutes, and then I'll take it off, use my, soft spatula here to scrape down the sides and everything like that. But for the most part, I do everything by hand. Now I am mixing in my warmed milk and honey with the eggs and butter. And because the milk is warm, it is going to help melt the butter a little bit more before I add in the sourdough starter here. And as you can see, it is nice and bubbly and it looks amazing. I was so proud of my job reviving the starter. I literally thought that I would have to start all over again after it sat in the back of my fridge for so long, a year. And then on top of that, like it got to freezing temperatures in my fridge, but it looks amazing. did say previously I did knead this by hand majority of the time, aside from putting it in my stand mixer for about like the last 2 minutes. So I will say your arm may feel like it's gonna fall off if you're kneading this by hand, but that's how you know you're doing a good job. I did decided not to put it on my counter because I just didn't want to make that sort of mess. But I do know it would be a lot easier if I didn't leave it in the mixing bowl. If you put it on your counter, you have a bench scraper, it's well floured. It's so much easier. You'll honestly use the bench scraper more than your hands. As you can see here, this is like this is ready. This is ready. It's not that bad. It's very elasticy and stretchy. Still somewhat sticky. It's not like your regular bread dough where you're kneading it until it's not sticky anymore. This one was definitely still sticky, but that's completely fine. I just push down the sides, as you can see here, with my soft spatula, and then I will grab a towel and cover it, and you put it in a warm spot in your house. Me, I will end up putting it in my microwave, but you could also put it in your oven with the light on, put it in your laundry room, whatever it may be. Now, I did want to show you guys my nice fancy containers. These are like Pullman pan containers. Sorry, not containers, excuse me, baking pans. They're Pullman pan baking pans, and I absolutely love them. So if you fill it majority of the way, your dough rises up to the top. It creates a nice flat top like you usually would get with a loaf bread, which is the reason why I purchased these in order to get the nice flat top. And as you can see, it pulls off. It has the little vent holes at the bottom. I purchased mine a kind of a rose gold color because they're pretty. Come on. I like pretty things. So here they are. And then it slides on like so. Pretty neat, quite honestly. I did purchase them off of Amazon, so I'll have them linked down below. And they were also fairly inexpensive. So, if you like to bake a lot, or if a family member is new to making bread, and they're fairly small, they probably would enjoy them. I did wash my pans out, and then here I am drying them thoroughly because I didn't want any additional moisture in the pans to affect the bread. I'm not trying to steam it per se with additional water as I'm baking it. So here I am drying it out. And this is a trick I learned from the older folks, and it's a good I guess you could say hack, or just to use everything you have. These are the wrapping papers from my sticks of butter because I had done a lot of baking and whatnot over the summer, and I decided to save them for things like this. So here I have pulled out one of my little butter sheets, I guess you can call it, and I'm using it to grease up my pan here. They're pretty useful, quite honestly, for those that may buy their butter in parchment paper or you make it yourself. Another one of the good things is if you save the parchment paper, you can actually use it to line your baking dish. So, like, cake pan. I've seen it primarily with loaf pans. So if you're making like a pound cake or something, you take that large sheet of parchment with the butter coating it, and you put it in your pan, and it's something that you get dual use out of it, and it helps protect your pound cake. But here I have my nice fluffy dough. It looks beautiful. And honestly, I barely wanted to touch it, but I have to punch it down and everything. It was so soft. I thoroughly enjoyed this. It's kind of like playing with slime. I know some people might not like playing with slime. I don't mind it. This was actually pretty fun. So here I am punching it down, and then I'm going to grab my soft spatula to get all of the dough out, as much of it as possible. I'm flouring my counter here just to prevent it from sticking. And then I'm going to push down those sides because the dough is still sticky. That's another reason why I found floured my counter and my hands, just to try to prevent it from sticking to me or any of the other surfaces. I'm not quite so worried about it sticking to the soft spatula though. Something else that you can do if you would like is add a little bit of like olive oil or whatever oil you use to the bowl before you press down the sides and everything, just so that it comes out a lot smoother. This wasn't too bad with using the spatula, so I didn't worry about using any oils or anything like that. With my dough on the counter now, what I'll do is press it out without using a rolling pin. No need for a rolling pin. I'll just press it out by hand until somewhat of a rectangle and then fold it up. Make sure you get every piece of dough, but I'll press it out into a rectangle, fold it up a few times, and then cut it in half. This is how we're going to form the two separate loaves. And now, once I cut it in half, I'll then flatten it out again. As you can see, I'm flattening it out into a rectangle. I had some hard chunks in my flour, so I wanted to get those out. But I'm flattening it out into a rectangle, and then because I want to get it as even as possible, and then I'm gonna fold it over a few times, and then I'm shaping it into a rectangle again before I cut it, just to try to get it as even as possible. They don't end up being exactly even. It's a lot easier if you weigh it out, but I wasn't too worried about it. Now I'm going to grab my knife, split it in half, right down the middle. Because I am cutting right on my counter, I try not to drag my knife, just press it to cut through. So here I have my dough, rolling it around in the flour to get it well coated. I'm going to spread it out with my hands into a rectangle, a rough rectangle. It doesn't have to be crisp. And then I am going to roll it up, almost like you're making a croissant, excuse me, right up into a log. And then I'm going to coat it in a bit more flour. This also helps prevent it from sticking to the tin as of right now, even though it is well buttered. So now I'm going to put it into my Pullman pan. It almost reminds me of a Subway hoagie roll. There it is. Lid goes on, and then into my microwave to proof one more time. After baking them, I decided to brush on a little bit of butter while they were still warm, just to let the top still be like soft and I guess crusty, but still soft, like a sandwich bread would usually be. And here I am cutting into it. It is such a beautiful color. Like, that's my favorite part. It is so pretty. The inside has the air pockets. It's soft. It has that tang like you would get from traditional sourdough bread, but it's like it's still soft like sandwich bread, and you'll see like it still has that fold right there. Oh my goodness, it was the absolute best. We ended up trying it with butter. We have some jelly back there, and we absolutely loved it. I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. I'll have all the details linked down below, and I hope to see you again next week. Bye.